My name is Adeline Porter, and I was 36 years old when my husband changed the locks on my own house while I was sitting beside my sick mother in a hospital room. I came home at 10:42 that night with discharge papers in my purse, dried coffee on my sleeve, and the kind of exhaustion that makes a porch light look like mercy. My key went into the lock and stopped halfway. I tried again. Nothing. The deadbolt was new, bright silver, still marked with the sticker the locksmith had not fully peeled away. For a few seconds, I stood there with my overnight bag sliding down my shoulder, telling myself there had to be a mistake. Then my phone lit up. It was my husband, Graham. The message said, "Do not make a scene. This house does not belong to you anymore." I looked up from the screen and saw his mother standing inside my living room window with my curtains pulled back, smiling at me like I was a visitor who had arrived after office hours. I did not scream. I did not pound on the door. I did not give Claudia Porter the performance she had been waiting years to call evidence. I lifted my phone, took a photo of the new lock, saved Graham's message, and started recording while his mother watched me from behind glass. That night, Graham called me panicking from inside the same house he had stolen my key from, because he did not know the lock was not the first thing that had changed. He did not know my neighbor's camera had already caught the locksmith. He did not know the county recorder had already flagged the document he thought would make him safe. And he definitely did not know my mother, weak as she was, had signed one paper from her hospital bed that made his entire plan collapse before sunrise. Before I tell you why my husband thought he could lock me out of my own home, tell me where you are watching from and what time it is for you right now. I want to know how far this story travels, because for one night, my husband thought the only witness was a tired wife on a dark porch. The house was a narrow blue bungalow in Asheville, North Carolina, with peeling porch rails, a maple tree that dropped red leaves into the gutters every fall, and a kitchen window that faced the mountains if you stood at the sink at just the right angle. It was not expensive when I bought it. It was tired, stubborn, and full of old plumbing, which might be why I loved it. I bought it 2 years before I met Graham, after my father died, and my mother helped me turn a small life insurance payout into a down payment. I worked double shifts as a medical billing supervisor, packed lunches in the same plastic container until the lid cracked, and learned how to repair small things because contractors cost more than pride. My mother, Ellen, came every Saturday to paint trim, hold ladders, argue with weeds, and remind me that a woman who owns her door should think carefully before handing out keys. I laughed then. I did not laugh later. Graham moved in after our wedding with 3 suitcases, a leather chair, and a talent for making temporary sound romantic. He said he would help with the mortgage once his consulting work stabilized. He said my house felt like a fresh start. He said he loved that I was independent. For the first year, I believed him. Then independence became the thing he praised in public and punished in private. If I said my mortgage, he said our home. If I said the deed was in my name, he said marriage was not a court case. If I said his mother could not have a key, he said I was making Claudia feel unwelcome. He never asked for ownership directly at first. People like Graham test the fence with small touches before they climb it. A closet for his mother's holiday decorations, a mailing address for his business, a spare key for emergencies, a suggestion that I refinance with his name included because interest rates might improve. Each time I said no, he turned quiet and his mother turned louder. Claudia called the house the Porter home as if repetition could change county records. She told neighbors Graham had rescued the place from neglect. She offered opinions about curtains, flooring, furniture, and whether my mother should visit so often. My mother saw it before I did. She said that woman is measuring rooms in her mind. I told her she was being dramatic. My mother said dramatic is what people call you when you notice the knife before it reaches the table. I wish I had written that down before the hospital machines started doing her breathing for her. My mother's illness gave Graham and Claudia the opening they had been waiting for. It began as pneumonia, then became complications, then became a long hospital stay where every day had the same gray light and every doctor used careful words that sounded kind until you tried to sleep with them in your head. I spent most evenings at St. Mary S. with my mother, reading insurance forms, adjusting her blanket, arguing with billing departments, and pretending I was not terrified every time her oxygen dipped. Graham visited twice in 3 weeks. The first time he brought grocery store flowers and took a phone call in the hallway. The The second time he asked my mother whether she had updated her estate paperwork. She was half asleep, but her eyes opened. She looked at him with the clear dislike sick women reserve for people who think weakness means access. She said, "My daughter knows where everything is." Graham smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. On the drive home, he said my mother had never trusted him. I said trust is not a welcome basket. He said I always chose her side. I said she was in a hospital bed. He said that did not make her innocent. That sentence stayed with me because it had no reason to exist unless there was a trial happening somewhere I could not see. The pressure around the house grew after that. Claudia started showing up when I was at the hospital, leaving casseroles on the porch, walking around the yard, texting Graham about repairs that needed a man's decision. One afternoon, my neighbor Elaine called while I was sitting beside my mother. She asked if I had approved a contractor to look at the back door. I said no. Elaine said a woman in a beige coat was walking someone around the property and saying she would soon be moving in to help her son stabilize the household. I closed my eyes and felt the hospital chair tilt under me. Stabilize, that was Claudia's word for taking over. I called Graham immediately. He said his mother was only getting estimates because I had let the house deteriorate while playing martyr at the hospital. Playing martyr. My mother was fighting for breath, and my husband was worried the fence needed staining. I told him no one had permission to bring contractors to my property. He said there it is again, my property. Like the truth was a bad habit I needed to break. 2 days later, he brought up refinancing again. He said medical bills were coming. He said we needed liquidity. He said adding his name would make everything smoother if something happened to me. I asked why something would happen to me. He said stress kills people too. The room went quiet after that. Even he heard the ugliness of it because he softened his voice and said he only meant we needed to plan as a family. I said family planning does not require changing a deed. He slept in the guest room that night and told Claudia I had become paranoid. I know because she texted me the next morning. Her message said Graham is hurting because you keep treating him like a tenant. A wife cannot build a marriage with locked doors. I saved it. I had started saving everything after Elaine's call. Texts, voicemails, screenshots, contractor names, dates. I did not know yet that records would become the difference between being locked out and being erased. My mother noticed the folder on my phone one night when I was helping her sip water. She asked if Graham was pushing for the house again. I tried to lie. She squeezed my wrist with a hand so thin it frightened me and said no soft answers. So I told her, all of it, the refinancing pressure. Claudia's visits, the contractor. The way Graham had started saying I spent too much time at the hospital, as if caring for my mother was a betrayal of him. My mother listened with her eyes closed. When I finished, she said call Mara Bell. Mara was the attorney who helped us when I bought the house. I said I would call in the morning. My mother said no, tonight. Sick people do not waste breath on politeness, so I called from the hospital hallway. Mara answered because she had known my mother for 20 years and because some women understand that urgency does not always shout. She told me to send her the deed, mortgage statement, and every message where Graham or Claudia made a property claim. She also told me to sign up for county recording alerts immediately. If anyone tried to file a deed, lien, transfer, or ownership document involving my address, I would receive notice. I did it from my phone with trembling hands while my mother slept behind the glass. That was the hidden detail Graham did not know when he changed the locks. He thought ownership was something he could pressure into existence at a dinner table, then print into reality at an office. He did not know the record was already waiting for him to touch it. The day of the lockout started with my mother asking for orange ice chips and ended with my husband's mother smiling through my living room window. Nothing in between felt dramatic while it happened. That is how betrayals often work. They arrive wearing ordinary clothes. I left home at 7 that morning with a change of clothes in my bag because the hospital wanted to keep my mother another night. Graham was in the kitchen making coffee. He asked when I would be back. I said late. He asked how late. I said I did not know because illness did not follow his calendar. He stared into his mug and said my marriage was becoming a storage unit for whatever time my mother did not use. I should have turned around then. Instead, I told him I was too tired to fight and left. At the hospital, my mother had a difficult day. A social worker came by. A nurse adjusted medications. Mara arrived just after lunch with a folder and a portable scanner. My mother insisted on signing an updated property protection affidavit and a written statement confirming that her contribution to my down payment had been a gift to me alone, not to any spouse, present or future. I told her it could wait. She said Graham is waiting for me to be too weak to remember what is mine and what is yours. Let him be disappointed. She signed slowly, angrily, beautifully. Mara notarized it in the family consultation room while a nurse watched as a witness. At 6:13 that evening, my county recording alert came through. Attempted filing linked to my address. My stomach dropped. Mara opened her laptop right there in the hospital cafeteria and pulled the details. A quitclaim form had been submitted electronically, claiming I transferred marital interest in the house to Graham Porter for estate planning purposes. My signature was on it, not my real signature. A lazy copy pulled from some old insurance form. The filing had not been accepted yet because the notary information was incomplete and the alert system caught it before processing. Mara's face became very still. She said, "Do not go home alone." I said I needed clothes, medication, my laptop, my mother's folder. She said, "Then call Elaine before you arrive and keep me on speaker." I promised. I meant it when I said it. But by the time I left the hospital, my mother had needed another scan, the pharmacy had delayed a medication, and my phone battery was at 12%. I was tired enough to make one bad decision. I drove home without calling first. The porch light was on. Graham's truck was in the driveway. Claudia's sedan was parked along the curb. I remember noticing the sedan before the lock. Maybe part of me already knew. I climbed the steps, tried the key, and felt the new deadbolt reject me. Then Graham's message arrived. "Do not make a scene. This house does not belong to you anymore." I read it 3 times, not because I did not understand, because my brain kept trying to protect me from the fact that my husband had written those words while my mother lay in a hospital bed. Claudia appeared at the window. She had taken down my blue curtains and tied them back with a gold cord I had never seen before. Behind her, I could see boxes in my living room. Her boxes, family portraits. A brass lamp, a folded quilt over my chair. She had not only locked me out, she had started moving in. If you were standing on your own porch after midnight with your sick mother's papers in your bag and your husband telling you the house was no longer yours, would you knock until your hand bruised, or would you step back and let the evidence grow? I stepped back. I took photos. I recorded the window, the lock, the cars, the boxes. Then I called Elaine. She answered on the first ring and said, "I wondered when you would get here." That sentence almost made me cry. Elaine had been watching. Her door opened before Graham could come outside. She walked across her lawn in slippers, holding her phone up like a shield. She said loud enough for the window to hear that I was welcome in her house and her cameras had recorded the locksmith arriving at 3:28. Claudia's smile disappeared. That was the first small victory of the night. Not justice. Not safety. Just proof that I had not imagined the door closing. Elaine brought me inside, gave me a charger, and told me not to speak to Graham without recording. Through her front window, I watched my own house as if it had become a crime scene across the street. Graham came onto the porch 5 minutes later and looked around, confused that I had vanished instead of begging. He called my phone. I let it ring while Mara joined the call from the hospital parking deck. She said, "Save your battery, save your voice, and let him write." So I did. Graham texted again. "You left the home. You abandoned the marriage. Mom is here as a witness." I stared at the words and finally understood the trap. He had not changed the locks only to keep me out. He had changed them to create a story where I chose to leave. Mara did not tell me to call the police first. She told me to breathe first because panic makes bad witnesses and she needed me to become a good one. I sat at Elaine's kitchen table with my phone charging beside a bowl of lemons, watching Graham's messages appear one after another. "You need to calm down. You cannot keep running to neighbors every time marriage gets hard. Mom is here because you abandoned the house. We will discuss access tomorrow." Access. The word made my hands go cold. Not home. Not safety. Access, like I was a tenant waiting for permission from the man standing inside rooms I had painted before I ever knew his name. Mara told me to screenshot every message and not answer. Elaine made tea I did not drink. Across the street, Claudia moved from window to window as if displaying ownership to the neighborhood. At 11:18, a police cruiser turned onto our block because Mara had called the non-emergency line and explained that a property owner had been locked out after a suspected fraudulent filing. 2 officers came to Elaine's door first, not mine. Officer Grant was older, careful, and unimpressed by family drama that arrived wearing legal words. Officer Patel was younger and kept her eyes on the house across the street while Mara spoke through my phone on speaker. I showed them my ID, the deed copy on my phone, the mortgage statement, the county alert, Graham's text, and the photos of the new lock. Officer Grant said this might become a civil property matter, but the forged document and lockout changed the concern. He asked if I wanted them to perform a standby while I requested entry. I said yes, but Mara spoke before I could stand. She said she wanted them to document the condition first. My husband and his mother had started moving items into my living room. I needed that recorded before Claudia had time to hide behind fresh curtains and soft voice. We walked across the street together. It is strange how your own driveway can feel foreign when police lights touch it. Graham opened the door before anyone knocked, wearing the face he used with waiters and church people. Calm, confused, reasonable. He looked past the officers at me and said he was glad I had stopped being dramatic. Officer Grant asked whether I was the legal owner of the property. Graham said it was our marital home. Officer Grant asked again. Graham said my wife is confused and very stressed because of her mother's illness. There it was, the first attempt to make my exhaustion sound like incompetence. I held up my phone and said the deed is in my name only. Officer Patel looked at the new deadbolt, then at the boxes visible behind Graham. She asked who changed the lock. Graham said he did for safety. I asked whose safety required locking out the owner. He looked at me then, and for the first time that night his calm slipped. Claudia appeared behind him holding one of my mugs, the blue one my mother bought me after closing. She smiled at the officers and said families sometimes needed cooling-off periods. Officer Patel asked whether she lived there. Claudia said not yet. Those two words entered the air like smoke. Not yet. Graham shot her a look so sharp even Officer Grant noticed. I did not speak. Silence can be useful when other people start opening doors inside their own lies. The officers asked to see identification and documentation supporting Graham's claim. He produced a printed copy of the quitclaim form. My false signature sat at the bottom like an insult wearing my handwriting. Officer Grant compared it to my driver's license signature and said the document appeared unrecorded and incomplete. Mara spoke through the phone and said the county had already flagged it for review. Graham's face changed. That was the second small victory. He had thought a submitted document was a weapon. He did not know it was also a trail. The officers could not decide ownership in the driveway, but they could document the lockout, the text, the attempted filing, the presence of Claudia's belongings, and my statement that I had not signed any transfer. Officer Grant told Graham that preventing me from accessing essential medication, work equipment, and personal documents could create further legal issues. Graham said he would allow me to gather a bag if I behaved. Officer Patel looked at him and said the owner does not need to behave to retrieve her medication under police standby. Claudia's mouth tightened. I stepped through the doorway with the officers behind me, and my house smelled like Claudia's perfume. Walking into that living room hurt more than standing outside the locked door. Claudia had moved a brass lamp onto my side table, placed 2 framed Porter family photos on the mantel, and stacked my books in a box labeled office clutter. My mother's quilt had been folded and pushed onto a chair near the hallway like it was waiting to be removed. The blue curtains were tied back with gold cords. Graham watched my face, hungry for the reaction he could later describe. I gave him inventory instead. I filmed the mantel, the boxes, the new lock, the moved books, the quilt, the stranger lamp, Claudia's overnight bag near the guest room. Officer Patel stayed close enough that Claudia stopped reaching for things. I went to the bedroom first. My jewelry box had been moved from the dresser to the closet shelf. My passport was not in the drawer where I kept it. My laptop bag was under the bed. My mother's medical folder was missing from the entry table. When I asked where it was, Graham said he had put important documents somewhere safe because I was not thinking clearly. Officer Grant asked him to retrieve it. Graham said he did not remember exactly where. That was when Mara's voice cut through the speaker, calm and sharp. She said withholding medical documents from a spouse caring for a hospitalized parent would be added to the report. Graham found the folder in the bottom drawer of his desk within 30 seconds. Funny how memory improves when consequences enter the room. I packed medication, my laptop, 2 work files, my mother's affidavit, and clothes for 3 days. Claudia hovered near the bedroom doorway, telling Officer Patel that I was always emotional when my mother was involved. Officer Patel asked whether Claudia was a licensed physician. Claudia blinked. No, then medical commentary is not useful right now, the officer said. I almost smiled, but the house still hurt too much. In the kitchen, I noticed something that made me stop. The small ceramic jar beside the stove where I kept emergency cash was empty. I had placed $600 there for hospital parking, groceries, and medication copies. Graham followed my eyes and said he used it for the locksmith because household safety was a shared expense. Officer Grant wrote that down. I asked for the receipt. Graham said the locksmith emailed it. I asked him to forward it to me. He refused. Elaine's voice came from the porch because she had followed at a distance and was now standing beside Officer Patel. She said her camera showed the locksmith van and she could read the company name if needed. Graham looked at her with pure hatred. Elaine looked back like a woman who had lived long enough to stop caring whether bad men approved of her. Before leaving, I asked for one more thing. My father's old toolbox from the mudroom. Graham said it was heavy and unnecessary. I said it had my name burned into the handle because my father gave it to me at closing. Officer Patel looked at him until he moved. He brought it from the back hall with Claudia muttering that I was being theatrical. I ran my hand over the burned letters and felt steadier than I had all night. A person trying to steal a house often starts by making the owner feel temporary. That toolbox reminded me I had been permanent here before Graham learned the address. When I left with my bag, Claudia said I was making a mistake I would regret. I turned back at the door and said the mistake was thinking a lock outranks a deed. That line was not planned. It came from the part of me my mother had raised before marriage taught me to whisper. I spent that night on Elaine's guest bed under a crocheted blanket, listening to my phone buzz until Mara told me to turn it face down. Graham texted at 1:06 that I had staged everything. At 1:22, he said my mother had poisoned me against him. At 1:41, he said if I involved the courts, he would claim abandonment and emotional instability. At 2:09, Claudia sent a message saying a good wife does not hide behind paperwork. I saved all of it. People like them hate paperwork because paper cannot be charmed, guilted, or interrupted. At 6:30, Mara filed an emergency petition for exclusive access to the home, an injunction against further filing attempts, and preservation of evidence related to the suspected forged quitclaim. By 8, the county recorder's office confirmed the attempted form would not be accepted pending fraud review. By 8:17, Graham called me. His voice was different. Not angry. Thin. He said, "What did you do?" I looked at Elaine's maple tree through the window and said I stopped letting you do it quietly. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next afternoon, faster than Graham expected and slower than my body could tolerate. I went back to the hospital before court because my mother had asked for me. She looked smaller than the blankets, but her eyes were clear when I told her what happened. Not every detail. Enough. The lock, the forged form, Claudia's boxes, the missing cash. My mother listened without blinking. Then she asked if I had cried. I said not where they could see. She nodded like that mattered. It did. She told me to open the top pocket of her hospital bag. Inside was an envelope with my name on it. She had written it before Mara arrived the day before the lockout, before the attempted filing alert. Her handwriting shook, but the words did not. It said the down payment gift was for Adeline alone. It said Graham had repeatedly pressured her about estate planning while she was hospitalized. It said Claudia had once called and asked whether my mother would consider signing a family statement that the house was meant for both spouses. My mother had never told me that. I looked at her, stunned. She said I was sick, not stupid. I pressed my forehead to her hand and finally cried where it was safe. Mara used that letter in court. Graham arrived wearing a navy suit and the expression of an injured husband. Claudia came too, though she had not been asked to speak. She sat behind him with a folder on her lap, as if the right paper might still become ownership if held firmly enough. Graham's attorney argued that the home was marital in practice, that I had left voluntarily during a heated disagreement, and that the lock change had been a temporary safety measure. Mara placed Graham's text on the screen. This house does not belong to you anymore. Temporary safety measures rarely announce ownership theft in writing. The judge asked Graham whether he had changed the lock while I was at the hospital with my mother. Graham said yes, but only because communication had broken down. The judge asked whether he had filed or attempted to file a quitclaim deed bearing my signature. Graham said he believed I had agreed in principle. Mara asked if agreement in principle usually included a copied signature and incomplete notary information. Graham's attorney objected, but the judge had already seen the form. Then Mara played a clip from Elaine's camera. The locksmith van at 3:28. Claudia carrying boxes through my front door at 3:46. Graham handing cash from the ceramic kitchen jar to the locksmith at 4:02. The courtroom was quiet when the video ended. I thought about all the times people told women not to overreact to little things: a contractor walking the yard, a mother-in-law asking for a key, a husband saying our home when the deed said my name. Little things are often rehearsals. Graham stared straight ahead. Claudia leaned toward him and whispered something. The judge told her not to coach a party from the gallery. Claudia sat back, offended that a courtroom did not honor her tone. Then Mara submitted my mother's hospital affidavit, the county alert, the deed, the mortgage records, the officer report, Graham's messages, Claudia's text, and the receipt Elaine's camera helped us obtain from the locksmith company. The locksmith had written residential rekey requested by husband, owner unavailable, mother present. Owner unavailable. Those words made me feel sick because they showed how easily absence becomes opportunity when the wrong person narrates it. Graham tried one last soft turn. He said he loved me and had only wanted to stabilize the household while grief was making me reckless. The judge asked whether stabilizing the household required his mother to move in boxes and replace curtains while I sat with my hospitalized mother. Graham had no answer that did not make him sound exactly like himself. The judge issued a temporary order before noon. I was granted exclusive access to the house pending review. Graham was ordered to vacate by 6 that evening under civil standby. Claudia was barred from entering or removing property. Any filing connected to the address required notice to my counsel. Graham had to return all keys, documents, and funds taken from the house, including the emergency cash or a written accounting. He looked at me then like I had betrayed him. That was the strangest part. He had changed my locks, tried to change my deed, moved his mother into my living room, and still believed consequences were something I had done to him. At 5:42 that evening, I stood across the street at Elaine's kitchen window and watched Graham carry his first box out under the eyes of 2 deputies. The same porch where I had stood locked out the night before now had a civil standby, a court order, and my name printed on the top page. Graham moved slowly, not because the boxes were heavy, but because every step was a public correction. Claudia sat in her sedan with both hands on the steering wheel and her mouth pressed into a hard line. She had tried to enter twice, first to collect her family portraits, then to supervise her son. The deputy told her both times that the order barred her from entering. Claudia said she was his mother. The deputy said that was not a legal category in the order. I almost laughed from Elaine's doorway because for years, Claudia had turned motherhood into a badge, a key, a title, and a weapon. Now it was just a word that did not open my door. Graham asked to speak to me privately before he left. Mara said no. He asked if I was really going to let strangers humiliate him on the lawn. I said he chose the lawn when he changed the locks. He flinched, then looked toward Elaine's house where I stood beside the woman whose camera had seen what his conscience had not stopped. I walked over only when the deputy stood close. Graham's voice was low and ragged. He said I did not understand how scared he had been. Medical bills, my mother's influence, the possibility that I would leave him with nothing. Nothing? He said it while carrying boxes out of a house that had never been his. I asked if he was scared when he copied my signature. He said he did not copy it. He said a document service had generated a sample, and he assumed we would sign later. Mara had warned me that lies become technical when plain ones fail. I said then you can explain the sample to the county fraud investigator. His eyes changed. That was when I understood Graham had not believed the forged form would leave the marriage. He thought it would remain inside our walls, where tone, pressure, guilt, and Claudia's tears could soften it. He had not planned for an office with a case number. By 6, the house was mine to enter again. I did not go in first. I let the deputies clear the rooms, then Elaine walked with me because sometimes bravery needs a witness who is not being paid. Claudia had taken the gold cords from the curtains, but left the holes in the wall where she had tried to hang her family portraits. Graham had removed his computer, clothes, and business files, but he left behind the smell of panic and 2 trash bags of papers in the garage. Mara told me not to touch them until she arrived. In the kitchen, the ceramic cash jar sat empty. My mother's mug was in the sink with Claudia's lipstick on the rim. That made me angrier than the lock. The house could be rekeyed. The deed could be defended. But that mug had belonged to the woman lying under hospital lights while Claudia drank from it as if replacing her was part of the renovation. I took a photo before washing it. Mara arrived at 6:35 with gloves and folders. We went through the garage bags on a tarp. Most of it was ordinary trash, food wrappers, packaging, old mail. Then we found the receipt from the document service, printed instructions about spousal transfers in North Carolina, a draft letter to my mortgage company requesting marital contact update, and a handwritten list in Claudia's sharp script. It had 3 columns: house, hospital, narrative. Under house, she had written rekey, move visible items, remove Ellen clutter, file transfer. Under hospital, she had written ask about Ellen capacity, get Graham listed for updates. Under narrative, she had written Adeline abandoned home, unstable from stress, mother controlling her. I sat back on the garage floor and felt the room tilt, not because the plan was clever, because it was cold. They had divided my life into tasks. My home, my mother, my mind, 3 columns on paper. Elaine put one hand on my shoulder. Mara photographed every page, then slid them into evidence sleeves. She said this is why we do not negotiate with people who make lists like this. At 8:12 that night, Graham called from a motel. I let it go to voicemail. His voice broke on the recording. He said his mother had gone too far. He said he had only wanted security. He said I needed to call Mara off before this became permanent. I listened once, saved it, and did not call back. Permanent was exactly what he feared because permanent is what he had tried to steal from me. The next morning, I hired a locksmith with the deputies still listed on the report and Elaine standing on the porch with coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. The new key slid into the new deadbolt cleanly, and I felt my body react before my mind did. My shoulders dropped. My jaw unclenched. A key can feel like a small object until someone uses one against you. Then it becomes language. This one said mine again. I changed the alarm code, the garage code, the mailbox lock, the building accounts, the utility passwords, the insurance login, and every emergency contact connected to the house. I removed Graham from the hospital visitor list for my mother because Claudia's notes had made the danger clear. When I told my mother, she closed her eyes for a long time. I thought she was upset. Then she said good. That man came into my room asking about paperwork while I had tubes in my nose. Let the nurses know he can ask God for updates. I laughed so hard a nurse looked in to check on us. It was the first real laugh I had had in weeks. My mother was not healed, but she was still herself. Graham's panic grew as the paperwork moved faster than his excuses. The county opened a fraud review on the attempted quitclaim. The locksmith provided his invoice and confirmed Graham had stated his wife was unavailable and that his mother had authority to be present. The document service confirmed the form had been purchased using Graham's email. The notary number was invalid. The copied signature was sent for review. None of this turned into a dramatic arrest that afternoon, and if this were a movie maybe it would have. Real consequences arrived through certified mail, legal notices, interviews, and the slow closing of every door Graham thought would stay cracked. Mara filed for legal separation and exclusive possession of the home while the investigation continued. Graham's attorney sent a letter claiming marital stress and miscommunication. Mara responded with the text that said the house did not belong to me anymore, the neighbor video, Claudia's 3-column plan, and the forged filing alert. After that, his attorney's letters became much shorter. Claudia tried reaching me through relatives. A cousin wrote that Claudia was devastated and had only wanted to protect her son. I replied with the photo of her notes and asked which column counted as protection. The cousin did not answer. Graham tried a different door. He sent flowers to my mother's hospital room. My mother told the nurse to remove them because she did not accept apologies from people who sent lilies after trying to take the kitchen. The nurse told me later while laughing quietly in the hallway. My mother grew strong enough to come home from the hospital after 2 more weeks, but not to her old apartment right away. She came to my house, our house in the old meaning. Mine by deed, ours by love. Elaine helped me carry her bag inside. My mother paused in the living room where Claudia's boxes had been. The walls were still marked, the curtains wrinkled, the floor scratched near the entry. My mother looked around and said it looks lived in by the wrong people. I said I was going to repaint. She said no, first we clean. So we did. Slowly. Her sitting in a chair with a blanket over her knees, giving directions like a general. Elaine scrubbing the mantel. Me patching holes where Porter portraits had almost hung. When we finished, my mother asked for her blue mug. I made tea in it and placed it in her hands. She held it like a trophy. For the first time since the lockout, the house did not feel like a crime scene. It felt bruised but alive, the way people feel after a long night when morning finally believes them. 3 months later, Graham asked to meet at Mara's office. He looked thinner, older, and smaller without Claudia beside him. He said he had moved into a rental and started counseling. He said Claudia had convinced him the house was the only way to save the marriage. I asked how stealing a house saved a marriage. He looked down. He said he was ashamed that he had lived in a home he did not earn and feared I would leave him with nothing. I told him he turned shame into a plan and called it family stability. He nodded, and for once did not argue. Then he asked if there was any way back. I thought of the porch light, the deadbolt, Claudia smiling through glass, my mother's hospital folder hidden in his desk, and the 3 columns on paper. I said no. Not to punish him. Because some doors should not reopen after you learn what someone planned to do once they had the key. The legal separation became final before winter. Graham signed an agreement acknowledging that the house was my separate property, that he had no ownership interest, and that the attempted filing was unauthorized. He repaid the emergency cash, the locksmith cost, and part of my legal fees through a settlement that Mara called practical and my mother called too generous. Claudia refused to sign anything because she insisted she had done nothing except support her son during a marital crisis. The county investigator disagreed enough to keep her name in the file, and that was enough for me. I did not need her confession to own my home. I needed her access closed. The investigation into the forged document ended with Graham accepting a diversion arrangement, fines, and a formal record tied to the attempted fraudulent filing. Some people wanted a harsher ending. Some relatives said I had ruined his life. I told them his life was not ruined by the lock he changed. It was changed by the record he created when he thought nobody would make him answer for it. Claudia moved away from the neighborhood rumor circle after Elaine told 3 women at the garden club that the only thing more embarrassing than stealing a house was being caught by a doorbell camera while carrying your own lamp into it. I sent Elaine flowers for that. My mother stayed with me through Christmas. She was weaker than before, but her humor came back in flashes. We repainted the living room a soft green. We rehung the blue curtains without gold cords. We put my father's toolbox in the mudroom where it belonged. On New Year's morning, my mother stood at the kitchen sink and looked toward the mountains. She said your father would have hated Graham. I said I know. She said he would have loved Elaine. I said everyone loves Elaine. My mother smiled and said then keep women like that near the door. She passed away 8 months later, quietly, after a better spring than the doctors expected and a summer where she got to sit on the porch every Saturday with iced tea in the blue mug. Grief came, but it did not come with regret. She had seen the house safe. She had seen the locks changed back. She had watched me file for divorce and not apologize for surviving. At her memorial, Graham sent a card. I did not open it until Mara checked it first because trust, once broken by paperwork, does not get sentimental access. The card said my mother was a strong woman. That was true, but too easy. Strong is what people call women when they do not want to name what they survived. I put the card away and kept living. A year after the lockout, I replaced the porch light. The old one still worked, but I wanted something brighter. Elaine came over to hold the ladder even though I told her I could manage. She said women who can manage still deserve someone holding the ladder. I thought about that for a long time. That is the lesson people miss in stories like mine. Independence is not the same as being alone. Ownership is not the same as isolation. I did not save my house because I needed no one. I saved it because the right people stood with me while the wrong people tried to call their theft love. If this story reminded you of a time someone waited until you were exhausted, grieving, sick, or distracted before trying to take what was yours, remember this. A locked door is not always the end of the story. Sometimes it is the moment you step back, take the photo, save the message, call the witness, and let the truth gather itself. Marriage does not erase a deed. Family does not outrank consent. A sick mother is not an opening for a husband and his mother to rewrite ownership. And anyone who needs you locked outside to feel powerful never belonged inside your peace. If this story moved you, write the lock does not outrank the deed in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to Quiet Truth Stories for more emotional family drama, hidden truth, quiet justice, family betrayal, proof reveal, and story time. If you want to support this channel, you can use the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Every bit helps us keep giving more stories for you. My husband changed the locks while I was visiting my sick mother and thought a new deadbolt could turn my home into his story. He was wrong. The neighbor's camera saw him. The county alert caught him. My mother's hospital paper protected me. And by morning, the house he tried to steal was no longer a place where his key, his mother, or his lies could enter.